Okay, we're on.
Great. These recordings will be up on the website, so probably by next week. So Steve, you want to get started?
Sure, we're introducing ourselves.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is Steve Fenton with HMTRI. Work with Mike and Nolan, and good to see everyone.
I'm Mike Senu, facilitator, and for HMTRI also. I do a lot of the notes, the connect issues, and these PLCs. Nolan? I'd like to introduce Nolan first. Well, Nolan, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nolan Curtis. I'm working with Mike and Steve as a consultant to HMTRI, and my main background is in strategic development after 25 years as a contractor with the U.S. Department of Energy.
Nolan brings and complements the talents we already have at HMTRI. He's really strong in outreach, communications, community involvement on the state, local, on the tribal level. So he complements the team. We've worked a lot with Department of Energy. He's also worked with us. He was at the first 10 all grantee meetings that we had. So he's very familiar with the program. And as I said, a lot of work is going to be happening in outreach. So we welcome him. Adriana, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Adriana McBride. I am a consultant for Eastern Iowa Community College, their ATEEC Earth program, and I do a lot of ecological restoration advocacy in my community.
Okay, Phyllis.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Phyllis Gross. I'm with the Full Employment Council in Kansas City, Missouri. I work in the Planning, Compliance, and Partnership Department.
Great. Diana?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Diana Napier with the Workplace in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We're a workforce development board.
Great. And Pamela?
Sorry. Hi, I'm Pam Carunchio. I'm with the Energy Coordinating Agency in Philadelphia. We presently have a grant from Environmental Workforce Development, and we're working on a proposal for the new BJT program.
Okay, Cameron.
Hello, my name is Kamran Zendel. I'm the acting director of the Center for Sustainable Development and Resilience in the College of Agriculture, Urban Sustainability and Environmental Sciences in the University of the District of Columbia. Sorry, the name was so long. I am leading a team working on a different component of urban sustainability. We are closely working with DOE, District Department of Energy and Environment, on a wide range of sustainability projects, from urban gardening to green infrastructure to ecological restoration and many more. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Mac.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I'm late. Mac Alabed. I'm calling from Southwest Economic Solutions out of Detroit, Michigan. We currently have a Brownsfield EPA grant providing CDL and hazmat technician training here in Detroit.
Okay, Christine.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm Christine Blanche, career services coordinator at SOBRO, the South Bronx Overall Economic Development Corp. We are co-grantees with the City University of New York, and we are doing a BJT grant where we are offering HAZWAP or OSHA in water vapor and soil sampling trainings to underprivileged and underserved New Yorkers.
Awesome. Brian.
Hi, folks. My name is Brian Barone. I'm with the DC Department of Energy and Environment's Land Remediation Development Branch. We are working on our first application for a development grant. Thank you.
Hey, Bruce.
Hi, my name is Bruce. It's my first time using Zoom. Yeah, that always gets a laugh. maybe a sympathetic laugh.
Right.
So I'm a resource development coordinator for the City of Worcester Mass Hire Central Region Workforce Development Board. We are a first-time EPA Environmental Workforce Development and Job Training Grant recipient. And we're finishing, well, we just finished up our first year of that program. And I think we're probably going to skip applying for this year's grant, but may perhaps go for next year's, given all the other priorities that are going on now. And I'm about to transition the grant program management to a colleague who will join the calls either next month or next week or at some point. Sorry for how long that was.
Well, we hope you're going to stop in every once in a while.
Thank you.
You're a bright light. So
I love you too.
Brian, let's see, did I do Brian? We did Mac. How about M Tennessee? What does M stand for? Sorry.
M stands for Matilda.
Oh, Matilda. Okay.
How's everybody?
Good.
Good. Matilda, Tennessee. I'm with Limitless Vistas, and we do job training for young adults in New Orleans.
Great. Laura?
I'm Laura White. I'm from Santa Fe Community College, and we are currently using a brownfields grant, and we are looking to apply for another one next year. After looking at the application, I decided I should probably attend every one of these I could between now and then to learn everything I needed to know to be able to maybe make a successful application. So I'm here to listen and learn. Thanks.
Laura's brand new in Santa Fe, and good luck. You guys have a great program. So, April.
I am April McCoy. Hello, everyone. I'm with Zender Environmental Health and Research Group here in Anchorage, Alaska. We offer the Rural Alaska Community Environmental Job Training Program, and we serve rural communities statewide.
Great. They have an amazing program up there and have every challenge you can imagine: rural, Native American, weather, jobs, employers, you name it. Do a fantastic job. W. Lipscomb.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bill Lipscomb with KISRA, Kanawha Institute for Social Research and Action here in Dunbar, West Virginia.
Michael, you're able to get online. You said that your mic was out and your camera's out. So that's Michael. So we'll catch him next time.
Michael's from the LA Conservation Corps.
That's right. Another great program. So Michael, I'm glad you're listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Sherry.
Hey everybody, Sherry Calloway from New Orleans and also from Limitless Vistas, as is Matilda.
And Dot Coleman. Yes, to unmute.
Mike.
Yes.
Dot is having some technical difficulties with the Full Employment Council as she works in EO.
Oh, great. Okay. Full Employment Council. We'll catch her the next one. Meg. Meg. Okay, we'll give Meg a chance. How about Rachel?
Hi, everyone. I'm in my vehicle on my way back to the office. But my name is Rachel Mowat. I'm the Department of Labor Special Projects Manager, and we're just got our first grant, and we're just going from there.
Okay, great. Drive careful. Katie. Katie, We'll come back to Katie. Larissa. Larissa? Oh, okay, great. Unmute. Okay, currently just
Yeah.
listen. That's fine. That's good. We're easy.
Oh, sorry. You know, it still takes a little bit of time, Mike, just to find the mute button and to transition. So nice
It's okay. You're
see
with
everyone.
You're with Youth Build. It's
Yeah,
a Youth Build is a great complement program. We have many youth builds that add this onto their program. It's fantastic. It's the synergistic effects are tremendous. So welcome, David. Hey, David.
Hey, this is David Cassavant over at the Sustainable Workplace Alliance. Some familiar faces, April over at Zender. We've worked with them, and we are located in Central Florida. We are a NIEHS grant recipient for their program that's similar to this, the Environmental Career Worker Training Program. And we've worked with a few folks, CDC over in Tampa, Pat Stone over in Puerto Rico. And so we're here to find out more and see if this is something we can help out with some of our brownfields in Central Florida.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Amy?
Hi there. My name is Amy Penny, and I am with the Alaska Forum in Anchorage, Alaska. And we have a environmental apprenticeship and training program, and currently have a grant, the Brownfields grant, but we are just always interested in seeing what is out there. So that's why I'm here today.
Fantastic. As I said, Alaska is it's a big state, and it's a tough state to work. So welcome. Did I miss anyone? Anyone want to introduce themselves? This does take a while, but I think it's beneficial because we can put faces to names, and what we really, our primary mission is to network. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve. Now, what we're going to talk about today, of course, many of you are writing your grants now or preparing them. We're going to talk about things that you could change at this point in the grant cycle, and you may still want to include them as you write your grants. And then the next PLC, we're going to talk about that actual grant writing experience. By that time, you'll be deep into the writing of it, just to double check some do's and don'ts. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to send you some very detailed notes that will have everything we're going to talk about. So you don't have to worry about taking notes. We'll try to get those out perhaps tomorrow, and they'll have everything that we're talking about. And you might want to look over those notes and see if you've included them or consider them as something you may want to include. And I'm sure it will supersize your grant application if you do that. So with that, let's move on. Steve, do you want to get started with some announcements before we get into this?
Yes, sure. I'll just give a few brief announcements. One, the Brownfields 2022 conference is on, and again, it's August 16th through the 19th in Oklahoma City. Not sure how many, if you can show of hands, how many of you have registered or plan to go? Okay, some of you are, okay, I can't see on the screen. But anyway, it is on. They're taking registrations. One thing I wanted to mention to you is a kind of a heads up. Since we all have to be kind of aware of things like this, you might want to check their health and safety COVID protocols. They've been updated for the state of Oklahoma. They're now at level, they call it low, which means they're not going to be asking for vaccine proof or a negative test or even require masks at this point. But just a heads up, a few weeks ago, all of those protocols were in place. So if you go to Brownfields, the National Brownfields 2022 website, and in the link that says, or the tab that says about, if you scroll down, you'll see safety and health. So you can monitor that, as we go forward here, because it'll probably stay that way unless there's some change. But wanted to give you a heads up about that. Also at the conference on Monday, the conference actually starts on Tuesday, but on Monday night at 5 to 6:30, they'll have the Environmental Justice Caucus for those of you who are interested in attending that. It's always an excellent event, and it's kind of locally driven. They talk about a lot of issues, but it's a good place to share ideas, network, and build relationships. And if you have somebody with you who's not registered for the conference, even they can attend. You don't have to be registered for the conference to attend this event on Monday night. So just a heads up about the EJ pre-conference event. And then also we have sent out what we call the HMTRI grant recipient directory scan. We've sent it out a couple of times. What we're trying to do is update our directory, what we have for you in terms of contact information, what your curriculum looks like, and various things like that. We've sent the scan out a couple of times. We still need people to respond. A few grantees haven't responded. And I'll put the link in the chat box again, and it'll also be on the notes. If you haven't completed it for your organization, please do so, because we'll be taking this document with all of your information to the National Brownfields Conference and assist in helping to market your program. So we'd like to have complete and accurate and up-to-date information. Also, the all grantee meeting is still on in October. We would come in on the 11th, which is a Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday would be the power days, the 2 full days of the conference, and then 14th is a Friday. It would be kind of checkout time. We're in the process of negotiating with hotels and trying to come up with a final hotel offer. And once we do, we'll let you know. And then we'll also put up the registration to that conference. But in the meantime, please note the dates. It would be in Alexandria, Virginia during that time. So stay tuned for more. So with those brief announcements, I'll turn it back to Mike.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Steve. Steve will be talking to us in a few minutes. First, we're going to hear from Nolan. And I already introduced Nolan, and he has got some interesting ideas. Again, everything you see will be in the notes, but we're going to share some of the items he's going to be talking about. Hopefully everybody could see this. Okay, Nolan, do you want to move forward?
Hi, and thank you. Again, these are ideas. I've worked on a number of grants and contracts, some as large as several $billion, most in the million-ish dollar range, and some smaller ones. These are not absolutes, but they seem to be really good ideas. And so I just want to share some with you. And these are things in near term that I think you need to do. One is there needs to be a proposal manager that basically just runs as a czar of this whole project. This person can be from the outside, because sometimes they're not loved because they have to crack a whip, or it might be you from the inside, but somebody has to manage the process, making sure that there's timelines and deliverables and people are on task and on the assignments and making those decisions. You need to dissect the RFA, and this is going to come out a couple of times, and break out each section and deliverable. And that means you identify every request for information. So what are all of the different inputs that they want in the RFA? And, again, you need to have an expert or champion for each section. And so it's a team effort. You need to develop and construct it with the proposal manager guiding it. And you need to ensure that there's somebody who covers every section. One of the things that often happens is something is in one section and it's moved to another, and there's not a coordination. So you need to make sure that the critical components are covered and that you are in touch with each other. There needs to be firm timelines for every element. And this I can't emphasize too much. I've been in the situation where we've had FedEx waiting and people are on the printers, and you have this absolute deadline of getting it out and into the package to submit it on time. Don't go there. It's horrible. So you want to make sure that you have firm timelines, what by when, and you really need to identify the items that are the long poles in the tent. Some of these things like labor assessments and some of your getting your boards together and your partners really have long lead times and maybe even should already be started or done. But the point is that those things that are going to take a while or where you have challenges, you want to identify those and get on them early and often. You want to have frequent progress updates. So again, it's a group effort. You need to share with each other where you have issues, where you have problems, and you need to surface all the roadblocks and problems early. It's really hard to solve these things as you go down the timeline. So if there's going to be a problem, if somebody can't reach it, or if you don't have the right members, you need to deal with that early on. You have to be willing to adjust your resource level of effort, but not your timeline. So, you know, time is the great tyranny. You're not going to be able to fix it or change it or stretch it out. So you might have to change your resources, how many people are on a task or who's on a task, or, you know, how late they stay. But it's that's the only thing that you can really shift because you can't really shift the deadlines. You need to quality check that each section is legible, succinct, and complete. And there might be multiple handoffs from the champion of a section to the leader of a larger section to the overall project manager. But you want to make sure that this reads. And so we often suggest that you have a set of what we call green eyes, someone new to the process who reads what was written, because you have a lot of things in your head and you know what you mean to say, but that might not always be what you're saying. And so does it get to the point? Does it answer the mail? Does it answer what's in the RFA? And you also, just going back, you shouldn't assume that a reader will read the entire proposal. Often these are graded and people have responsibility for different sections. So each one of those sections has to be able to stand on its own. And from the project manager standpoint, you need to be a little bit opportunistic. Where are the big points? You know, where's the bread and butter? Where's the payoff? And don't spend a lot of time on something that's only a few points and neglect something that might be a bigger block of the score. And then you quality check. I usually repeat that twice, because you do it once, go to bed, do it again, and you'll find that there's a couple things that are there, and it's usually bigger than semicolons. You know, it's math errors in your you know, document, or there's just whole sections that are worded out. And then finally, hope is not a strategy. So you want to never give up, you want to never surrender, but you can't say we're going to do A, B, C, and then D, a miracle happens, and then we're going to go to E, F, G, right? You know, so we're always hopeful, but hope isn't part of your strategy. Just hope is something you do. There's a few long-term things and in terms of strategic building, and one is relationship building. And so if you don't have it or haven't done it, or whether you're just starting now or been doing this a long time, you need to build relationships with your EPA regional administrators, your community partners like the city and county and faith communities, your boards and boards of directors, and your local business and industry. And so it's just like when you ask someone for something. If you have a relationship, they know you, you know them, and it's easier to make that ask than a cold call knock on the door saying, hey, I need you to write this letter or do this thing or partner with me. Organizational capacity. You may have a lot of this capability in-house. You may need to partner with someone to get it. As you go through the process, you'll identify where you're strong and where you're weak. So again, long-term, it's something to think about and possibly build. And then your ongoing labor market needs assessment. This is something that really should be going on all the time so that you understand your labor market in the area that you're in and what those needs are, and you're designing your program to meet the needs of those employers, which is really what's going to meet the need of the student, because they want a job at the end of this process and you want them to be successful. So again, I appreciate your time, and you know, we'll be sending this to you. So, and I'm going to hand it off to Steve.
All right. Thanks, Nolan. Fantastic. And welcome to the HMTRI team. 25 years later. That was excellent. A lot of things I'm going to talk about, some of the points I'm going to highlight are things that Nolan has already mentioned, so I won't talk about them at too much length. But the section I'm going to be talking about are suggestions for improving the BJT application outcomes. And starting with engaging the community and government. Again, Nolan kind of talked about this a little bit, but briefing the mayor's office, elected representatives, members of the city council, and then engaging with, public, municipal, and service agencies. And then, as Nolan mentioned, locate and contact your brownfield project officer, and be in touch with them. Participate in public meetings, and then recruit advisory committee members from each of the sectors that you're having as partners. That will help kind of keep everything together as you go forward. And of course, including employers. As far as program development, that's another key area. Make sure to specify which of your curriculum topics match what is supported by the grant and which ones do not. That's an important thing to highlight. And then also make sure the curriculum matches the labor market assessment. That's what Nolan referred to as one of those long tent pole items, that labor market assessment, something that should be done. And you may already be well underway with that, or maybe even done, but that's something that takes a lot of time. And making sure that it matches the employer needs, the curriculum. That's something that is often overlooked. Mike and I have seen this over the years where there have been programs started, but they didn't have labor market justification really to back it up or the support. So making sure that the jobs are there before the program is developed is really a key to your success. Identify who's going to be doing the training. Are you going to have contractors? Are you going to have people on staff that do the training? And if they're contractors, bring them on, and get them involved in the process early on. Regarding the evaluation criteria, and again, Nolan mentioned this, but deconstructing the RFA to ensure that every request for information is addressed in the proposal. Every question must be answered, so make sure you don't leave blanks. And then include in the narrative any meetings, public events you've attended. For example, if you had 5 meetings with the city council, make sure those kinds of things are included in there. And then also identify special programs or populations you may already be working with. For example, like we had a group a few years back called the Oregon Tradeswomen. They worked pretty exclusively with unemployed and underemployed women as a population that they served. There's other groups that you may be serving, such as the Vietnamese boat people. I know we have at least one organization that serves that organization. Could be hearing impaired or physically impaired individuals. And then in the other factors section of the proposal, take a look at that closely. If you're working with veterans or intending on employing veterans, make sure you specify that as well. And then as far as partnership and employer recruitment, make sure you identify, formalize, and finalize those key agreements and partnerships. You may have already started that process. Get a commitment from the partners and specify what the commitment is. Is it an in-kind contribution? Is it to provide a service or facility? Or is it a commitment to provide financial support? Whatever it is, those types of things need to be identified and have the commitments in writing, and ask for those specific commitment and letters of support ahead of time. As part of the application process, or make sure you encourage partners, employers, and advisors to participate in your activities and your events. And then the advisory committee members are also key partners, and they could maybe help participate in the proposal review process. It's really important to look at that proposal and make sure you got everything accounted for, and make sure it's worded properly. So would encourage you to include them in that review process. So those are just a few things, kind of highlights. Again, Nolan hit on some of these, but just to reiterate them, engaging the community and government, the program development piece, and then also responding to the evaluation criteria and the partnership and employer recruitment and getting all of that formalized and finalized. Mike, you want to take it from here?
Thanks, Steve. What we're trying to do today is tough because we got a lot of line items that we're going over, and the three of us don't have the most dynamic voices where we're going to keep your interest, but we want to go through these. I want to reiterate the fact that all of this is going to be in the notes that are going to go out hopefully tomorrow, latest on Friday. If you're, for some reason, you don't get them, just send me. The most direct way is msenu@gmail.com, and I'll make sure that you're not only on our PLC list. Sometimes your service provider might ding us or reject us, or 365 may block us or whatever. So for some reason, if you don't get these lists, just email me. Maybe Steve, you could put that in the chat, my email address, and they can get this list. I'm going to play the Grinch. Nolan and Steve had told you some things that you could do to supersize your proposal. I'm going to take the role of the evaluators. And over the years, quite a few years, we've always asked the regional coordinators and the evaluators, what did you take points off for? What are the reasons people get rejected or shot down or don't get points off? Many of them have indicated that sometimes the difference between a winning proposal and one that doesn't make the cut are just a few points. So you really want to scramble for every possible point you can get. And I'm going to run through these. And again, as I said, if you miss them, don't worry about it. These are the highlights. The itemized list will be there. But when we look at the community issues, for example, there was no discussion in this person's grant about public meetings. They had no public meetings. You may not have thought about this, and this is why I'm mentioning these things. It isn't too late to have a public meeting. You've got several weeks, and you're going to say, well, I'm not going to call a public meeting just for this. But what you could do is you could go to a church. You could ask them to make an announcement about your program. And the way you want to do this, you want to say, we are planning on submitting a grant to the EPA to develop a job training program in our community. That's all you need to do. Are there any questions? You have input? Would you like to work with us? You can make it as elaborate as you want. Get into a public meeting of some sort. And what I'm saying is you want to do that so you could include it in your proposal. This is very important. We could call it a supersize. If you don't say anything about working with community, you'll get dinged for it. So you have time to do this. Do it if you can. Some very savvy applicants, they had their ward representative mentioned it in a city council meeting. Very clever. In other words, could you make an announcement that we're interested in submitting an application for a proposal? You're not asking for help. You're just asking them to make this announcement. And again, whatever you do, make sure you get credit for it, which means you put it in your proposal, in the narrative. Another one is they didn't address EJ issues. This is all about EJ this year. We're talking between the equitable development and Justice 40, which we've had PLCs about. You're going to have to bring up something to do with environmental justice. To the extent that you could work in Justice 40, that's fine. Make sure you mention it. The grant was deducted, for example, and your grant may not, if you don't have all these things, it may not be, but these are things that, again, the evaluators commented of what they dinged things on. There was a grant that no specific population was targeted. In other words, they said, we're gonna build it and they're gonna come. No, it doesn't work. We want to put in name the population, the specific population. And of course, as our grantees have said, the more numbers you can use, the better you're going to be. Don't make general statements. Put numbers in there. They love to see numbers. So if you can learn something about the target group you're working in, put in the very specifics. Oh yes, it's a enterprise zone. Oh yes, there are 3 brownfields. Yes, we've got 2 transfer stations and a Superfund site and a brownfield. That's what they want to hear. Those are the things that are going to get you points rather than taking away. There was nothing said about outreach. How are you outreaching the community? It's amazing how many people will develop a program and not talk to the people that it's going to impact. How are you doing it? And having to do with that outreach, you want to make sure that someone in the community, whether it's an influencer, a politician, elected representative, or someone that lives in the community, you want to get them on your advisory committee. Steve mentioned this. If you could form your advisory committees before you get started, you're going to be way ahead of the game. In other words, anything you do before you write, this is primarily for new grantees. Existing grantees already have an advisory committee, but new grantees, if you could get your advisory committee going, and again, the way you phrase all of these things I'm talking about is that you frame it in the fact of you are proposing to EPA a grant. It will not be awarded till February of next year, but we would like to form an advisory committee. Would you be willing to work on this advisory committee? Start your advisory committee and write it in a grant. You're new, but you've got your ducks lined up. Now, another aspect of this, if you want to think negative and say you don't get the grant this year, you've got a head start on next year's grant. So get your advisory committee. I'm going to say the same thing about your contractors, your training contractors. If you could vet them, and again, this is even more so. You say, well, how could I bring a contractor? I don't have the money. No, you say, would you be interested in bidding on this? If we get it, when we get it, if we get it, if our schedules work out, would you like to bid on it? Again, if you can, this is again oriented towards newer grantees. Older grantees already have their trainers lined up, or some of them. To the extent that you identify a trainer that's been vetted, you can put him in a grant. So to the extent you can do that ahead of time. So as far as working with community, those are the highlights. Let's move on to the labor market assessment. There was no linkage between the labor market assessment and the course offerings. In other words, they did what they were supposed to do. They did a labor market assessment, they did a community assessment, but then they went out and they started teaching courses. No linkage. In other words, there was no, we are teaching asbestos because we've got 10,000 old buildings and we've got 5 asbestos contractors who are interested or may be interested in looking at our people. That's the way you want to phrase that. So in other words, we are linking what we actually did, that you acknowledge that you came in contact with employers, potential employers. They need people. They're willing to look at your people. You don't have to say they're hiring my people. They're going to look at your people for employment. If they have these credentials, HAZWOPER, asbestos, lead. Now, someone who tries to do this in isolation says, we're going to do lead and asbestos, and you're a brand new community and there's no lead and asbestos in your community because everything that was built there was after 1978 or whatever. So that shows a total disregard for what I just said. So you want to make some kind of linkage between what your labor market assessment did and the courses you're offering, and demonstrate that in your grant. Similar to that, there was no direct interaction between employers and your program. In other words, you did this in isolation, you invented this, you wrote this great grant, but anyone could have written it anywhere in the United States. No, you want to link, again, link to those employers, because remember, this is an employment program. It's it's more of an employment program than it is a training program. You know, we justify it in EPA because it's a training program with specific skills, but the net goal of this is to employ these people with EPA credentials. Recruitment and screening. Some people totally miss a methodology for recruitment. They have no recruitment plans. We're just going to sign up, sign the sheet, you know, and here's the biggest reason for failure of programs. They get panicky, and this is more directed to new grantees. Again, I got the grant, I've got to fill up, I've got to get 20 people, and I start accepting anyone who wants to do this. No way. Bad, really bad, because the people aren't motivated, they're not screened properly. They come in and they say, this is too hard, I'm dropping out. Your retention rates are horrible. You don't have motivated students. You can't place them. They're dropping out. So you really have to have some methodology. For example, you're going to do an orientation night, maybe 2 orientation nights. You might do a tryout night. You got an application to fill out. The harder you make it to get into the program, the better feedstock you have as far as people coming into your program. If someone is willing to jump through 5 hoops, they're going to finish your program. They're going to say, I'm not going through all this just to drop out. And so you want to explain that in your grant, in your narrative. Are you going to have screening requirements? For example, are you going to be doing drug testing? Some of our grantees, positive drug tests are not important. Negative are not important. And either way, now when you're graduating them, when they're graduated, they need to be drug-free. But we have excellent programs that say, we'll take someone who doesn't pass the test, but we have life skills and we've got caseworkers and drug intervention people, and we can help them. So part of our mission is to help underserved, and because someone doesn't pass a drug test, doesn't mean they're out. Now we have other grantees that says, absolutely hardball. You can't pass a test, or if any time in a program, random test, you can't do it. We have some that say, we're going to test you before, and before we will not place you unless you're drug-free. So they're all over the map, and I wouldn't make a judgment one way or another which is better or which is best. What I would say is, though, spell it out. In other words, you've got to, it's not important whether you have a drug test or don't, but it's important that you spell out what your parameters are going to be for drug testing. This new grant, we're going to be talking about stipends and transportation costs. Again, that's never been done before, but you're going to want to include and be very specific about how that's going to work in your program and how it's going to fit into the budget. When we get into training, and we'll talk about this, we'll have some discussion when we run through all of these things to talk about them in more detail. Training, of course, has to be aligned with the EPA approved training list. This isn't all EPA related environmental remediation. You can't do air, you know, for example. It's got to be people working out of OSWR, the OSWR programs, and that's well spelled out in the program. It doesn't mean you can't do it. You just can't use EPA funds to do it. So if you may want to have an air monitoring program, but be clear, you're not going to be spending EPA funds to be doing it. It's fine. You could, whatever you do with leverage funds that's not EPA is fine with EPA. So you want to align your training with what's allowable. People have not outlined their training cycles. In other words, they said nothing about how many cycles they're going to have each year. They're going to do 1, 2, when are they going to have them, fall, spring? Depends on where your climate is and what your employer demands are. Here's one that people often forget. What are your health and safety protocols? Now, we think about COVID, but COVID isn't the whole game. What about classroom, laboratory health and safety? What kind of OSHA regulations? We've actually, among the many years and among the people, the community colleges we've worked with, we've actually had people cited for unsafe using hazardous materials in labs in unsafe conditions. So this is critical. Do you have safety protocols in place, or do you have something that you could mention in your grant about training, health and safety protocols beyond? You're going to definitely talk about COVID, because we don't know what's going to happen with COVID, but you'll have the social distancing or whatever, but you may want to mention other health and safety. There's a grant, for example, that didn't mention anything about what kind of certs the people were going to get. What are federal, which ones are state, which are local. In other words, many of the grants, they all have federal certs, but they'll also have state and locals. They might have to do with specific issues relative to that state, and they'll, as you go through the summary sheets of these grantees, you'll see we're giving them, 3 federal and 4 states in these particular areas, and so the readers will have a good idea of what certs are coming out of it. And this goes back to what Steve said. We'd like to, in our employee finder, which we're going to be marketing to employers that are national, we're going to be giving out contact information and what are the certs that the people that are graduating from these programs have. So someone says, oh, I need someone in Oklahoma, and he's got to have HAZWOPER, but I need someone with confined space or whatever. We could say, well, here's the person you need to contact that's closest to where you need that person, and he can go ahead and make an offer. So that's important, your certs. We have been talking partnerships since the beginning of time. This is only essentially, it's going to be a $500,000 program, but when you work that out, that's only $100,000 a year for 5 years. So you can't do this program without leveraging and partnering. So partnering is really important. And I acknowledge that some programs we have are totally self-contained. In other words, they are big enough, they're attaching onto a youth build or a social organization, Fortune Society, or they've got all-inclusive services and employment and caseworkers and drug rehabilitation and even housing. That's okay. But you want to mention those partnerships within your organizations you have. In other words, this person said, well, they deducted points because they had no mention of partners. Well, if you say, well, I don't need partners because we're self-included. No, you've got to mention that. And really everyone needs partners to some extent. It might be, if for no other reason, you're going to need the employment services, the WIBs, the one-stops. You're going to need, you need to absolutely, everyone needs to mention the WIBs, the workforce investment boards, or the equivalent of a WIB is interchangeable with the local one-stop or whatever it is. You have to have them. They're going to be a partner to help you get people, place people, provide you services that you may not have. The more services you need, the smaller you are, the more partners you're going to have. Now, when a partner commits something, he says, okay, we're going to partner with Goodwill, and they are going to do our life skills. They're going to do our financial literacy, and they're going to do some resume construction and working with employers. If they commit to something, you got to get that in writing. Now, when at the end of this, we talk about the attachments. Those attachments and letters of support, what they mean by that is people who have committed to be a partner. So anyone who commits something, whatever it is, you want to push them on sending you a letter of support and what their commitment's going to be. And again, as I said before, for new grantees, you might be a little apprehensive whether you're going to get this or not. Always phrase this that we're going for this grant. If we get it, we'd like you to partner with us. Could you provide some drug rehabilitation services, or could you provide some drug testing, or could you provide fit-up services with the health department? If you're the health department, could you provide our physicals? And they, sure, we can do that. Next question. Can you send us a letter, a support letter that says you would be willing to, so you will be providing support services? This is extremely important because they're going to look at your support letters, and if it's something from a congressman, oh, I support this program, that's like no letter. You want those commitment letters say, I'm going to support this, I'm going to do this, I'm committed to do this. I'm an employer, I'm willing to look at. I'm not saying I'm going to hire because I don't know what my hiring demands are. I am willing to look at graduates of this program that have certain credentials. That is a commitment letter. It goes in the attachments and it goes a long way. If you don't have those things, you really need to. And I'm even suggesting that if you're doing internal partnerships, in other words, you have in another division or another part of your organization, some of these support services, let them write a letter to you and include this as a commitment letter within the organization that says we're going to provide drug testing. We're willing to provide housing to people that are housing deprived. Put that in a commitment letter and put it in your attachments. It'll go a long way in both partnerships and saying, oh, they've got partnerships they're leveraging, and we're going to talk about leveraging next. You want to have it in there, okay? And have that commitment. Now, when we talk about leveraging, people are a little unclear. What does that mean? Well, if you're getting in kind from another division, say you're Auberly is almost a self-contained, they work with Department of Labor, they work with a lot of other organizations, but they have a lot of facilities in-house. You want to cost out that the leverage services from other parts of your organization. These are all services that are not being paid for by EPA, and you want to get credit for them. And don't be chintzy. I go big when you talk about leveraging. People always underestimate the leveraging services they're getting. If you've got a bank that's willing to provide financial literacy training, can you imagine what it takes? And you need to make an estimate of what it takes for that to support that person who's going to come out and train your people, to go there, to train them, to track them, to do the homework, to make the presentations. Go big on leveraging and make sure you've got that in your proposal.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
A question down in the chat from Katie. She said, can we attach existing MOUs instead of letters of support?
Here's the thing about MOUs. They don't want to use existing anything. Okay, if it's more than 6 months old, ask them if they could send you an update on that MOU and with a current date, because they don't even want letters of support that are more than like 6 months old. So I would say that's a red flag. And the way to get around it is, could we update the MOU? And that's where you want to go. And that could cost you points if you didn't. So definitely, a strong flag on that. And that's not hard to get. Just tell them we'd like to update that MOU. And one thing to mention with regard to leveraging is if they back out, and you get the grant, then you need to talk to the project officer later on. This is later on. You need to tell them, we had someone in our grant who was providing these leverage support. They went out of business, or they can't do it anymore. And then you'll talk about how you could replace that person. But it is critical. And definitely do the in-kind. Don't pass up the in-kind or the facilities. The facilities are huge. I mean, if you get the fire department to lend you their fit-up pad and provide you with fit-up suits, you could ask them what they think the value of it is, but it is huge to have facilities, equipment, personnel. I mean, it is huge. And again, the more you leverage, it's going to look good on your grant. You could, it's not inconceivable that your leveraging will be much more than the money you're going to get from EPA. And that's the way this program works. Outputs and outcomes. They didn't have a timeline or no milestone chart. In other words, that gets back to what I said before. They really didn't have a schedule of what their cycles are going to look like or how they're going to do that. They didn't pay any attention to retention or attrition. They just winged it. They assumed we're going to keep everyone or whatever. Another thing that happens in that case is they say in the beginning, well, we're going to train 150 people. And then when you get down into the grant, which we'll talk about the next time, turns out that they aren't recruiting enough people to train that many people or place them. So your numbers all have to jive. Nothing on tracking. They omitted it. They left, they trained, and then it's up to people to get placed, up to people to track. They're off on their own. Many training programs are like that, not this one. They have they're very concerned about placement and tracking. And you need to include that. How are you going to vet the employers that are interviewing and hiring your people? Are you going to, as a condition of them working for you or hiring your people, are you going to ask them, you'd like to check periodically on their progress? And again, included in the proposal, we are going to work with our employers or potential employers. If they hire our people, we are going to ask them to, you don't have to do formal monthly reports, but you ask them that you'd like to check in and track the progress of those employees. And you'd be amazed that we talk about it at another time, how that helps you in terms of retention and recruitment for future classes. So nothing on sustainability. Again, now this is going to be a 5-year grant. So we're talking about much longer periods. They used to be these 3-year grants. Originally, these grants were designed to be starter grants where you'd get the couple $100,000 and you'd do leveraging, and then pretty soon you would blossom and get all kinds of money from other agencies. And that has happened. We've had many people, some may be on the call, that got this as a starter grant. And now they're up at $4 or $5 million from other grants because they've got a successful program going. And pretty soon, oh, you did a federal grant. Well, that demonstrates you could handle a federal grant and you were successful. Well, we've got some other money we'd like to throw at you. And one thing about politicians and programs is once they have money, they've got to find someone who can do the work that's capable, and they need to show success. So this in some ways is a starter grant. It gets you going, but you would be amazed at how you blossoms and you get under the money. And unfortunately, as maybe Michael could attest to, Bruce, we fund many programs where pretty soon we're small potatoes. And to be honest, they're snowed under, and there's people with millions of dollars. And we like to say, well, keep us in mind, stay in the loop, reapply. It may be small, but it could introduce you to a whole lot of other opportunities. And that's worked both ways. We've had, in New Jersey, we had a program. They were a starter program. They got so successful, they got state money. They didn't need us anymore. We felt good about that, but at the same time, it's part of the sustainability program. How are you planning on leveraging this program to perhaps go after bigger or other grants that could supplement it? Placement. As I said before, your employer commitments were not in the grant. You had no employers that were committed to looking at your grants. In other words, if you can get in that commitment letter, get one letter from an employer that says, yes, we've been working with you. We would like to work with you. You've got some grantees with tremendous credentials. They've been vetted. We would like to look at them. Get that in writing and include it in your attachments. It'll go a long, long way. Of course, it's required that you have a placement target, a minimum, 70%. We have grantees that are 100%. That number, it just make sure it's over the 70 required, but I think it depends on how your program goes. They go, hopefully it gets to 100 where you place everyone. One comment that was made by an evaluator, which I didn't totally understand, was they didn't talk about hiring incentives. I don't know that would detect anything from your grant. There are communities where there are hiring incentives. You could talk about hiring incentives and that you got trained, vetted, certified graduates. That's an incentive. It doesn't necessarily have to be that someone's gonna subsidize their salary or anything like that. There are communities where the state is subsidizing brownfield job training worker subsidies. If you could find that, it'd be great. I think at a minimum, you could suggest as part of your employer packages, these people are vetted, they're drug-free, they're certified, they've gone through a 15-week or an 8-week or 12-week, whatever program is, and these are their credentials. I think that's a tremendous incentive right there. And the last one, and we're gonna, yes.
Hey, Mike, just David Cassavant left a comment in the chat about the number of attachments. Page limit is 15. But that doesn't include the attachments, right? There's
there's an attachment. Page limit's at 15 on the attachments.
On the attachments also. Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So that's good to.
You're gonna have to pick the best ones. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
You don't want to have 20 pages of support letters. I would pick the gems out of that and the biggest commitments, and you could put in your narrative, we have included a sample of, or we have commitment letters from 20 people, but we're going to include 10 of them as examples, something like that. This is a place where you want to strut your stuff. You want to make your program look as good as possible. The last thing is this whole thing about other factors. My contention is everyone has other factors. Everyone. You're probably going to have a veteran in your program. You may have a disabled veteran. They're a little vague when they talk about other factors, but they give you a table and you could check boxes. And I would check boxes, but if you could include in the narrative other factors, and this comes in other parts of the writing of the grant. You're in a super depressed area. You've, as I had earlier said, you've got 2 Superfund sites, 5 brownfields. It's chronically unemployed. If double check your poverty rates, if it's 20% or greater, there's a box checked there. Almost everyone, I would say everyone has a special factor. And where special factors come in is you score 98% and someone else scores 98%, the person who's got special factors in there has the edge. So definitely put something in special factors. I would not do that. So this is I tried to do the highlights on these. Again, in the notes, when you get the notes, you're going to get a line by line item of those. That I don't know that those are all inclusive. Those are the things that the evaluators told us that I call them landmines, but these are the things that they knock things off. And I would probably go through that list when you get it and just say, okay, let's check the boxes. Have we done all this stuff? And if we haven't, is there a reason we shouldn't or don't want to or doesn't make sense, to do that? And there's still plenty of time to do this. I would say of all those things, it's really important to get out into the community and have some sort of meetings. That's one that everyone forgets. If I were looking at things that are going to propel you beyond the others, that community involvement and partnership development are huge. And to the extent you get the mayor's office or city council. Someone said, all we did was ask our representative if he would announce it in city council, or there was a church meeting and we had a community meeting and they announced that they were planning on, you do a little blurb, planning on submitting to EPA a job training program. And it may get you other benefits that we'll talk about at another time. You may get money that's not EPA money as a result of doing something like that. So, do we have chats? Are there some chats we need to address, Steve? That
No, I think we've been trying to discuss them as they came up. But I guess, are there any other questions at this point from anybody?
I have a comment I'd like to throw in, and I think Mike touched on it a bit. But agencies, federal agencies, I don't speak for EPA, but they generally don't want to be the sole funder of a program. So this idea of leveraged resources and getting more bang from the buck is really big from the federal agency standpoint. And so, you know, again, don't undercount all of those things that other organizations or people help you do. The administrative support, the, you know, office space, the classroom space, the supplies. Make sure you really count those things, because that's all true and it's all leverage support. But at the end of the day, you know, you have to realize, why are they doing this? Why does Congress do this? Why does the agency do this? And it's to create an opportunity for people who don't have one. So, you know, those special populations and those special circumstances go really big if you're working with people who are coming out of drug rehab or criminal justice, or underserved or underemployed, high crime, you know, I mean, whatever you can glom onto, that those are the areas of the neighborhoods or the issues that, you know, will serve you well.
Another question that came up, someone called me and said, we're thinking we'll pass this year. We've had a couple of people talk about that today. What's your opinion? I said, no, if it were me, I would submit a grant. I don't want to submit blank pages, but I would put something in for a whole lot of reasons. One, and this may even go more towards new grantees than existing grantees. You want to get in the loop. If you submit a grant and you're rejected, you get to sit down and have a phone call or Zoom or whatever with your evaluators, and they can point out your strong points and your weak points. One thing that people don't realize is the regional coordinators, we don't have any on the call today, but the regional coordinators have a little contest. They all want their region to have lots of applicants, and even more than applicants, successful applicants. They want you to apply, and if you apply and don't make the grade, they may give you a bloody looking reader sheet of review, but then they'll say, I hope you're going to apply next year, and I hope you're going to be on the list for the next one, and keep in touch, because actually, even those who are rejected, this is due in August. You really start to have to write this grant. We weren't able to do it this year because they threw so many changes and surprises at us. We didn't know till June 1st that we had 60 days to complete these, but normally, and we did some work, but we'd start in February or March on writing these grants and developing these partnerships for new grantees particularly. So you want to get in on a loop and stay in the loop one way or another. You know, I know you don't want to submit a bad grant, but it's not going to affect the next one. And actually, many first-time applicants, some don't make it, and some do, but often the ones that don't make it the first year will get it the second year. And we're not sure where this program's going. One thing that we've heard from EPA is we're on new turf. It looks like they're going to get, you know, $10 or $12 million a year, but someone did ask the question, is this going to be annual? And they said, Channing said, well, we haven't figured that out yet. that was a little concerning to me. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how many people are going to apply. Intuitively would say you're going to get tons of people, 500,000, but now we're talking about 5 years. So it's not such a big grant. If it was 500 over 2 years, and this question was raised, and I had this with Channing, and again, it's a new program. The question I had is, could I write a grant for 3 years, or let me write a 4-year grant with the last year placement and 3 years of training? In other words, give me more per year with a shorter period of time. And we asked that question, and he said, I would recommend a 5-year grant with 4 and 1. Now, you're not getting me anything, Channing. You're basically committing to 100,000 a year for 5 years. What I would like to see happen to this program off the record is basically, 200,000 a year for 5 years. That now we're talking something we can work with. So this is something that this program is in flux. So yes.
Did Channing mean train 4 years, track 1, or did he mean he would like 4 years of training with the tracking going on throughout?
Tracking would go on throughout. In other words,
what did he mean by 4 + 1?
4 + 1 would be, right now it's actually 2 + 1. It's a 3-year grant. So
Right.
what they just extended that thinking. In other words, it's 2 + 1. The last year you wouldn't be doing any training. You would train 2 years. You would track 1 year. The last year would be placing. It would be tracking and placing. Under the old method, you would train for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That 3rd year is a buffer. You might do a little training, but you're basically placing graduates you couldn't place, and you're tracking everybody. So that's the current grant, or the old grant. That's the 3-year grant. This new one now is 5 years. So it's like a 4 and 1, where you could do training in that first 4 years. I think it's worth talking to Channing and getting a very definitive. In fact, I'll send we need very specific guidance on this, I think.
Yeah, and a clarification that we're training the cohort of people, and then we're tracking them for 1 year after their training. Then we move on. We're not tracking everybody for 5 years.
No, that's not an issue. In other words, I think the grants that you track for 2 years or 1 year, I'm not sure of the wording in it. No, you would, for example, your first cohort in your first year, you're going to train them and you're going to place them. You're going to track them for a year. Then you're going to do the second one and you're going to track them for a year. It could be 2 years. Now, having said that, Cypress Mandela's, we asked some questions. They said, well, we track forever. And what they mean is they have their graduate list and they keep them on a listserv, and they keep them in the loop. In other words, they've got all their graduates, and whether it's Facebook or how you doing, or we're going to have a Zoom call of all our graduates. We're calling back for alumni nights. So those are all tracking mechanisms. So they're going to say, well, we track forever is what they say. But the mandatory, what's written in there, you don't have to track them for 5 years. Absolutely. You don't.
It'd be great. I mean, if you had the funding for it, but if you don't have the staff to do it, you can't do it.
Right. What the best thing you could do is what Eric said. We keep contact with them, and we offer them refresher courses. That's a great way to track. As by the way, another nuance is we will offer the way we track is we offer refresher courses. On the HAZWOPER, you have to get the 8-hour refresher. So as a perk, and they'll sign up, and then you bring them back in the program. So that's something you'd want to include in your grant proposal.
So Mike, a direct question that came in was, can we apply for a 3-year grant with for 500,000?
see, I asked that question and got an unsatisfactory response. Channing's words, for those of you who were there, was, I recommend you do a 5-year grant. Now, what does that mean? You know, to me, when I heard that, I was ready to push him on it. And yeah, I didn't want to make an enemy, but we don't have, someone needs to make a policy decision. You know, if it were me, I would go for a 3-year grant or a 4-year grant for 500,000. But I would, if I were to say that now and they reject it, no, it's got to be a 5-year grant. So I don't know what the answer to that is, and I think we need to get that now.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
In fact, I will write him an email that this came up at our PLC, and we feel we need a definitive answer. For example, can you do a 3-year grant for 500,000 with 1 year of tracking, 2 years of training, 1 year? Can you do a 3 years of training, 1 year of tracking? You know, and his response is, will we recommend? Well, what does that mean? You know, that's like no answer. Are you going to deduct points if we do that? And I would hate to write one of these grants and then get dinged because we didn't do what he recommended. You know? Right. So if we could get a policy decision on that, and he's going to have to inform the evaluators also that this is okay. One thing Channing said 2 or 3 times is, we're on new turf and we've never done this before. So I think we have to give them some slack. They're trying to figure this out. And if I hear something, I'll pass it on to everybody as soon as we can.
Mike, this is Kamran.
Yes.
Do we have any minimum of number of trainees that we need to train every year?
They used to give some guidance on what they would like to see. Normally our cohorts are about 20, and then some drop out. You might lose 5 or 3 or 4. So they've got a class of about 15, and they might do, we've got go-getters who are doing 3 cohorts. Some are doing more. We've got some super, well, people who have youth build, they might have huge numbers. It's there again, they're throwing it back at the grant writer. You can, it's up to you.
And is there any expectation regarding how many cohort per year?
How about some of the people that, can we hear from some of the people that have been doing it and feel comfortable with what they're doing? For example, April, it comes to mind, how many cohorts do you do a year?
We do 1 a year.
Okay, see? And April's had an extremely successful program, you know. Bruce, how about you? You're relatively new on this.
Hang on, sorry. Hang on. Let me get the question again, please.
How many cohorts do you do a year?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. So we do 3, 1 each in April, May, and June. And that was based on feedback that we got from our employer partners, who said, you know, as we know in New England, that there are really only 4 seasons here, and that's winter, fall, and construction.
Good point.
And we plan to run another 3, and that's actually really hard to do, running 3 in consecutive months. We plan to do another 3 in April, May, and June of 2023. I wouldn't advise that. I would advise spacing them out bi-monthly if possible.
How many in each cohort?
Well, we had projected 10 that we thought would go through the entire 4 weeks of training. But after the first cohort in April, we decided to change that option a little bit to let people kind of take a course here and there. So we focused less on getting everybody through and more on getting more people through certain courses. And we offered 4. We offered OSHA 10-hour construction safety, OSHA 40 HAZWOPER, OSHA 40 asbestos worker supervisor, and then a 32-hour Massachusetts de-leading contractor supervisor course that we offered through the City of Worcester Housing Development Division.
So they're all over the map. You could go, I think the important thing is you mentioned it, you know. Pamela, how many cohorts do you do generally?
We do, in the 3-year grant, 4 cohorts over 2 years, and then the tracking.
Okay, so 2
And
cohorts
it's
a year.
different. It's HAZWOPER, mold and moisture, lead RRP, OSHA 10, and BPI air leakage controller.
So these are programs that are successful, and you know, I guess they demonstrate that it could be anything, but you need to tell them what you're going to do is what's important. Any other questions? Okay, well, in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about just the final stages of writing through these grants and submitting them. Meanwhile, we'll get an answer from Channing, and I think that's an important point, and we'll be discussing that some more too.
Hey, Mike, this is
Yes.
Adriana.
Yes.
You mentioned brownfields and Superfund sites. So can the funding also cover Superfund sites then, I presume? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, they can. It is a brownfields job training program, and there's original brownfields. They interpret that loosely, and also there's state brownfields, there's federal brownfields, there may be even a local brownfields, and there's a Superfund. So it all kind of fits in that whole arena. To be honest, I think grantees who are able to place their graduates in environmental remediation jobs are applauded. You know, when you get down to trying to place jobs in a not real good economy, it gets a little tricky. So it's kind of loosely interpreted.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is Nolan. I'd like to go back and encourage, even though it's a lot of work, everyone to go through the application process, because you'll, one, possibly come out with a successful application, 2, come out with one that's so close, you know, that you could get that feedback and know what you need to do. But even going through it, you'll see where you have gaps, and you know, what you need to strengthen, you know, as you intend to apply the following year, the next time the opportunity arises. So I would not get discouraged by the complexity of the RFA, or kind of what everybody's talking about, or, oh, we'll never be like, you know, some of these other successful programs. I'd encourage you to really take heart and go through the process, and, you know, never give up, never surrender, you know, kind of thing. And but it's not easy.
Some of these programs are bigger. You might come from a bigger organization where you've got, and the way it works is everyone volunteers their time. So you may have particularly if you're a youth build or you're a social service organization, and you're already running programs, you've got the draw of a lot of people. And in those cases, what happens, or you're a community college, people are volunteering their time. And what we talked about earlier today was everyone gets assigned something to do. You're an outreach person, you're going to be working on employers, and you're going to be working on recruitment and screening, and you're going to be working on training. So you may have 6 or 7 people. They're all charged and have deadlines, and they're feeding it to a grant writer like Laura, and we're going to talk about this next time, but you need one person to write the grant, because we're going to be talking about budgets next time and things. Everything's got to jive. So what in big organizations, everyone's feeding into the grant writer, and the grant writer is digesting all of this and asking for more information, and then sitting down and just grunting through that grant. And those are the most coherent grants. The alternative to that is you're sparsely populated, you don't have the resources, and you're just someone's gonna have to sit down and just write that grant. You still need someone to submit it, and you need the accountants to look it over and all that, but depending on your staffing and your other resources will depend on how you're going to write this grant. You want as Nolan said, you want a single pair of eyes to look it over on the first draft, and then you want a lot of single pair of eyes to review it. And in fact, one of the positive plus to supercharge your proposal, send them to your advisory committee, or send a copy of the grant to an employer that you feel good about, or a leverage partner, and have them look it over. Because you'd be amazed, as Nolan said, a grant sits for a couple of days and you pick it up and you say, what the heck is this? You know, I don't understand it. And so, but it'll be different from large organizations to small. And if you're small, don't feel negative about it. They have other factors. They have leveled the playing field. One thing I have to say about it, EPA, they have earmarked a certain number of grants. It's a bias against the existing grantees to some extent, and they say we're going to have 5 or 8 new grantees no matter what, and they may not be competitively the best grant. They've got a clause in the RFA that gives them the authority to consider new grantees, or to consider less affluent, I don't know the word, or not as sophisticated grantees. So those who say I can't compete against these guys, I want to say that's bogus. It's not true, because there will be a bias towards your application. So don't let that discourage you by any means.
And Mike, my other question, communities without employers for environmental remediation jobs, can these grants be used to kind of create those employment opportunities?
Well, that's a tough one, because they want you to have a brownfields in your community. Now, I said there's several types. The money flows, the way this money flows is it comes from Superfund originally, flows down through the brownfields bill. And while this money is coming strictly from the infrastructure bill, they're using the same criteria. In other words, it's dedicated towards brownfields communities. So you probably need to dig up a brownfield in your community. Now, it's pretty hard to find a community that doesn't have a brownfield, unless you're out in the suburbs in the high-end neighborhoods. But you wouldn't want to have one there anyway. So I would say that everybody could probably find some sort of brownfield in their community, but you couldn't. This money is restricted fairly well, and it's restricted in not only what you could teach, it's in the RFA, but where you could teach it. It's got to be underserved also. So.
Right, that's not necessarily an issue. There's definitely brownfield, but I'm not necessarily aware of employers offering.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is a really good point as far as tribes go. Sometimes nations they want to live on the tribe, and Rachel could speak to this. They love the tribe, but they want to work in the environment. But people who live on reservations love to travel, and they like construction jobs, which is kind of like a construction jobs. So it's not all bad that they live on the reservation. They may have brownfields on the reservation, but they may get jobs going to New Orleans or somewhere where there's a hurricane. Rachel, could you say anything on that in terms of the people that you might be training?
Yeah, currently we have several programs that are seasonal that will allow them to seek training in their off season, like our firefighting. Right now, they go off you know, anywhere and at a moment's notice to go fight a fire. So, yeah, and we have a lot of people who want to train and learn how to do something to make themselves better, as opposed to going to college, because they need to be able to use their skills now in the field. So, but yeah, we're anticipating a lot of participants in all of our events, and, you know, we're just excited to be able to reach out to everybody.
You know, another point on that is once you have the credentials, there are a lot of national firms who, well, there's a couple of things. One, big firms bid on jobs, but they have a local requirement to hire local people. In other words, you've got, it may be what they call a PLA, program labor agreement, or a community benefits, they call them BNAs, community benefit agreements, where if you're going to do a development, you have to hire a certain percentage, certain number of people who live in the community. And so while you may not think that you have an employer in your community who is going to hire your people, it may turn out that you've got someone outside the community who wants to work in your community, and they need to hire local people with credentials. And so that's another employment opportunity that could come to pass. Yeah.
Great, thank you both for that feedback. And then my last question, are there any consequences for not fulfilling the parameters of the grant?
Well, yeah. Well,
Right.
there's no consequences for submitting and not getting accepted. Once you're accepted, you go through a very formal process of contracts, and you're working with the grants office and EPA. I mean, it is not trivial. Those of you who have gone through this, you're working with the grants office, you're signing essentially contracts. If you don't perform, there's a debarment list, and we have the attorney general the attorney for EPA retired speak at our all grantee meetings. You do not want to get on a debarment list, because your name, anyone you're ever associated with, you can never be a project officer and work for EPA or get EPA money. So that puts you on a do not fly list, essentially, if that happens. Yeah. So there are consequences, but it's rare that you would get to that point. I don't think they would let you get that far.
Yeah, also there's a difference between not being as successful as you thought you would be, planned to be, hoped you would be, and being fraudulent with the federal money, you know. So, you know, if you say we're going to do a cohort and it's going to have 15 people and you can only get 14, nobody comes after you with the you know,
good point. Excellent point.
Gun, you know,
excellent point.
As opposed to saying we're going to do this program and then you just never do it and try to take the money, you know, that's a different deal, you know, or you buy equipment ostensibly for a program that you don't do, and you use equipment for something else, you know, that's where you get into trouble.
But that's an excellent point. We've got a lot of grantees who said we couldn't do it. We couldn't place our graduates, that we had dropouts. We were expecting a 80% retention rate, and when we got a lot of losers when they weren't motivated, and we did a bad job of recruiting, and we lost half our class. I mean, okay, well, do better next time. It's not fraudulent, as Nolan said. It's just that you tried, and this is a tough business, and it always doesn't work. You know, that's okay. That's okay. Well, we took more of your afternoon than we had planned to, but I hopefully some of this will be useful as you develop your plan. And you could send me msenyu@gmail.com. If you have some questions, I'll be sending this off to Channing, and hopefully we'll get a prompt response. I don't know we'll see what happens. As soon as I hear anything, I'll pass it on. Or any other questions that you might have. Okay. Well, everyone have a great day, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking a little bit more about this, and as we getting down to the wire and actually start talking about submitting that grant and where we go from here. Oh, David, did you have a question?
That was just a thumbs up for all the help, and we'll see you
We
in a
could use
couple
that.
weeks.
Thank you. Steve, you want to shut off our recording?